going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. June is over, we're halfway through the year, as wild as that is to say, and it's time for another monthly wrap-up video where I rank all the new releases I saw from worst to best. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your favorite movies were in June, as well as your least favorite. As always, this is just my list, not a definitive ranking. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. Now, if you've seen a few of these lists before that I've done, you know I was doing around 30 movies or so per list, but this time it's only 21, which is still a lot, but it feels like not much compared to what I was doing, which is basically because I got called back into work in the middle of the month, so the amount of free time I had to watch everything significantly dropped. So a few notable releases that I wanted to see did not make this list. Hopefully though, they should be included in the next video, and like a few of these other videos that I've done, you will see some films from much earlier in the year make this list as I'm still playing catch up. But let's not waste any more time, and let's talk about them. In last place is Infinite, a movie with an interesting enough premise and strong enough opening act that saves it from being my new worst movie of the year, but it's otherwise an absolute train wreck. The main thing being that it is borderline impossible to follow for much of the film, dropping all of this exposition, bringing up all these different concepts, but never caring to expand on any of it, just leaving you absolutely confused the entire time. And whenever there are moments you can follow, it feels like nothing more than a poorly acted knockoff of The Matrix, though never going as deep as it could have. And it leads to this being nothing more than wasted potential, as it falls very short of being the enthralling sci-fi epic that it could have been. At number 20 is Caveat, another slow burn, bare bones haunted house movie from Shudder, and while this did receive mostly positive reviews, it unfortunately just did not work for me. Not only is the pacing for this painfully slow, with its over-reliance on aimless long takes, but the story didn't feel coherent. It feels more like a series of plot twists that weren't fully thought through, leaving us with confusing character decisions and contradictory ideas, and it felt so obviously restricted by its budget, which I get, but at the same time, it really hurts the film overall. And while I don't know if there was a grander idea initially thought out, whatever the result was here just didn't work. At number 19 is The Ice Road, yet another in a long line of Liam Neeson action thrillers, and it's easily one of the lesser entries. Now, usually I don't mind these movies, but this felt so boring, between an uninteresting villain, clunky fight scenes, as well as grating moments of poorly written dialogue and long-winded sequences of exposition. The cast is all fine for the most part, but their performances are nowhere near enough to save this, so this one's an easy skip. At number 18 is Super Deep, which is kind of an ironic title given how little depth it had. This basically tries to be this tribute to John Carpenter's The Thing, with a little bit of that old school disaster movie feel mixed in there. And while I don't mind that so much on paper, the execution is all style and very little substance. The characters are disposable, there's a lack of urgency, and while there is this terrifying creature at the heart of it, it comes too little too late, and it just made for one of Shudder's most forgettable films. At number 17 is Awake, which is yet another post-apocalyptic film in the vein of A Quiet Place, but this time, instead of characters being unable to speak, here they can't sleep, because otherwise they immediately die. And it just screamed gimmick to me the entire time, as it tried hitting a number of the same beats as A Quiet Place, but containing nowhere near as much of the emotional weight that that film had. Now, this film is tolerable thanks to the fact it moves pretty quickly and has some solid action scenes and a great cast, but it mostly felt rushed, and anytime it featured attempts at character development, it felt so shoehorned in and was nothing integral to the plot. They were just there to give these otherwise one-dimensional characters something of a personality. Now, it's not the worst thing you can watch, but I'd say you're better off sticking with A Quiet Place. At number 16 is Undine, and these next few I thought were either okay, or I liked them enough but just would say proceed with caution if you're going to check them out. This is a romantic drama that's mostly pretty grounded, while occasionally dipping its toes lightly into supernatural elements revolving around a water-based mythological creature. It's a film that tends to be a bit light on plot and plays out more like a series of moments between these two lead characters, some of which I wasn't always sure what the point was, other than to just remind us it's connected to this myth in some way. Now, I wouldn't say I hated the movie or even disliked it, as it's kept together by a light, breezy tone and a wonderful little romance at the center of it, but its restrained approach just wasn't for me. Now, it did get a lot of great reviews, so maybe you'll have a different experience with it, and I do respect it, but it just might not be my thing. At number 15 is The Disciple, a character drama about a young man's drive for music, taking him on a decades-long journey to protect his craft. Now, if you're someone who's been caught between following your passions and pursuing other options because they're the safe choice, this film will resonate with you to a degree. The main character's journey shows him trying to hone his craft, but also sees his happiness slowly dissipating as he takes on unfulfilling jobs to sustain himself, and the film captures this struggle well. But your overall enjoyment of it is going to boil down to what you want from a movie. Now, this doesn't do anything particularly wrong, it's just another one, like Undine, where it has an ultra-grounded and restrained approach that might just not be totally for me, because this also received a lot of glowing reviews. The film is more of a subtle look at internal struggles with no huge emotional peaks, and as a result, it has a very slow burn approach to it as well. So with a 2-hour runtime of static long takes, I can see people saying that it's boring. So I'd only say check this one out if you like slower films. Just make sure you're in the right mindset when you give it a shot. At number 14 is The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which is definitely a big step down from those first two films, which were some of my favorite horror movies of the 2010s. Now, James Wan doesn't return for this one, and it's noticeable, with only a small handful of moments that come even close to as frightening as either of the films he directed did. But it's still not a bad movie. Its pacing is definitely off, with more of an exposition-heavy narrative, but it stays afloat thanks to Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, who are both great as always and inject this hit-and-miss story with just the right amount of emotion to make it a good enough, if inconsistent, time. At number 13 is False Positive, which is basically just a contemporary take on Rosemary's Baby that becomes painfully obvious almost right from the start. Now, if you've seen that classic horror movie before, you'll unfortunately be able to call a lot where this is going, which was basically my one major issue with the film. But I didn't flat out dislike it, mainly because the direction by John Lee did make for some pretty creepy moments, and the performances from Ilana Glazer and Pierce Brosnan were just that good that they elevated a lot of the material and made me enjoy watching these characters. Plus, it has a pretty disturbing ending that at least made for a great payoff, and was one of my favorite endings in a film this year so far. It's just a shame that, while the film's watchable overall, the rest of it didn't quite live up to the greatness of that ending. At number 12 is Wish Dragon, a cute, charming little film that kids will most certainly enjoy, but does suffer from one glaring issue, that being how the whole movie's basically a retooling on Aladdin, down to John Cho as a fast-talking dragon that clearly channels the energy of Robin Williams as the genie. Because how closely it follows a lot of the same beats, it will most certainly rub people the wrong way. However, I do think what it lacks in originality, it makes up for with a pretty nice sense of humor, as well as a warmth and sincerity to it, along with some visually stunning animation. And while you can call everything that happens in this movie from a mile away, I think there's enough that adults will be able to have enough fun with it as well, even if nowhere near as much as younger audiences. At number 11 is Flashback, a film that I was honestly expecting to hate as I heard just how convoluted it was, but I surprisingly found myself fascinated with it and liking it more than I thought I would. Now, it's not an easily accessible film, and parts of it do not make sense at all, and there have been a lot of other films that tried to do what this did and failed miserably. But this sort of worked for me, even if not as much as I would have liked. I'd say if you're paying attention, the first 80 to 85% of the movie makes sense for the most part. But then it goes full David Lynch on you and throws a bunch of curveballs in that last act, and a lot of it didn't fully line up with one another, so it ended on a bit of a weaker note than it began. Still, for me personally, there's enough by the end to give me some sense of emotional satisfaction, even if not completely. Now, I will reiterate, it's definitely not a film for everyone, so if you're going to check it out, just proceed with caution and be prepared to pay attention as best as possible. At number 10 is Fatherhood, a sweet and sentimental film that's enjoyable enough, though it does feel like a number of these distressed parent-child films that we've seen before, just with not quite as much depth as it should have had. I thought Kevin Hart was solid here, as was Alfred Woodard, and the film's sincere tone, along with these performances, are what carries it. but sometimes statements would be made without having proper build-up, or subplots would get wrapped up quickly as they began, and I just wish the film added like an extra 10 to 15 minutes or so to justify some of the beats it hit, because it would have gone a long way. That being said, what we got was still not bad overall, and I know this definitely will have its audience, for those who just want something schmaltzy and easygoing to enjoy. At number 9 is The World to Come, and I'd say everything from here on out is at least pretty good and more of a solid recommendation. This is a forbidden romance drama that both feels familiar and like something of a downer, but its faults are at least offset by Katherine Waterston and Vanessa Kirby's performances, who are both just absolutely delightful together and really bring this movie up whenever they're on screen together. And with the film's themes being about escaping isolation and loneliness, when these two characters are together, it hits so well, and we feel just as warm as they do, even if it's only for a brief moment. Now, while I'm not a big fan of these period dramas in general, performances really carry this one for me, and despite being nothing groundbreaking in terms of storytelling, I found it to be worth the watch. At number 8 is Dream Horse, which is basically just like any other scrappy underdog story that we've gotten before, even if it is based on a true story. It's totally predictable and by the numbers, and if you don't like sports movies to begin with, then I'd say don't waste your time. However, this does put all of its faith in its cast, and while this can be something of a risk, it does pay off here, as everyone was charming enough to make me feel invested and put a smile on my face. The one area where it actually did somewhat surprise me is that it was funnier than I was expecting it to be. Some of the attempts at being quirky do fall flat, but the comedic timing by most of the cast was pretty good overall. This is another one I'd say only check out if you just want something easygoing to watch, or if you like sports movies in general. But I liked it personally. At number 7 is Pixie, a stylish dark comedy that feels like a crossover between Martin McDonagh and Quentin Tarantino, which will be the thing that people either love about it or hate about it. Some felt it was nothing but a ripoff, but I found it to be a nice homage to those filmmakers, while still containing an identity of its own that was charismatic enough to work. While everyone in the cast is pretty funny, the standout is by far Olivia Cooke as the title character, who has a sharp delivery and quick wit about her that you always wanted to know whatever it was that she did next. It's not the most groundbreaking film of the year or anything, but I had a lot of fun with it and still think there's enough to make it worth your time. At number 6 is F9, The Fast Saga, which I know will be highly controversial to put so high up on this list, but this is a movie that's getting way too much hate as far as I'm concerned. I'm not saying it's a great movie by any means, but it's mindless fun, and sometimes that's totally a good thing. While it definitely cranks up the amount of unrealistic stunts done here, it's not something totally new to the franchise, which has had its share of ridiculous action scenes. This just takes on a much more self-aware and comedic tone than ever before, and it really worked in the film's favor, at least for me. Now, it does have its share of problems, like the runtime is definitely way too long, and whenever it leaned too much into its story, it didn't totally work as it felt a bit disjointed, but for the most part, I had a blast with it, and I think it's far from one of the series' worst films. At number 5 is The Amusement Park, the long-lost film of George A. Romero, filmed early in his career, but was then shelved and believed to be lost until only a few years ago. This is an educational film that centers around elder abuse, using this amusement park setting as a surreal nightmare, and it definitely feels experimental in nature, and because of that, it might not totally work for everyone, especially with its limited budget clearly showing at times, but it's a film that manages to be unnerving, not because of any graphic violence, but because of the ways in which our main character endures this mental anguish over the course of one day, with many of the rides acting as parallels to everyday occurrences. It's a neat little film, and despite being filmed in the 70s, it makes for a nice, technically final film from the legendary Romero. At number 4 is An Unquiet Grave, a minimalist supernatural horror movie that feels like something in the vein of Pet Sematary, with a grieving man whose wife passes away and enlists the help of her sister to bring her back. This film absolutely screams first feature film, between its hour and 15-minute runtime, the fact that there are only 2 actors in the entire movie, the limited setting, and much more. And for that, it may rub some people the wrong way who may dismiss this as boring. And to be clear, it definitely could have done more with its premise. But this is a film less focused on spectacle, and it's more interested in being a character study, using its horror elements to explore the stages of grief and how extreme one may react as a result of their grief. And with 2 solid performances at the forefront, it makes for an engaging and disturbing little horror film. At number 3 is Covaris Ada, one of the year's nominees for Best International Feature, and it's an absolutely brutal film, though not without reason. While its relentlessly dour tone will definitely be a bit much for some viewers, It has a very strong anti-war message that makes it both an effective character-driven film as well as an engaging thriller, as the title character has to race against the clock in order to save her family. Though, despite using real-life events to convey such a story, it never ventures into exploitative territory by any means. It makes you uncomfortable, but it does so because it has something to say, and because of that, it could have easily given another round a run for its money at the Oscars had there been an even stronger awards push for it. At number 2 is Luca, the latest film from Pixar, which isn't quite on the same level as their top tier content, but to be clear, it's still a very good movie. I think the thing people will be most disappointed with this is that it had the elements to make for a really complex film, and instead it opts to keep things pretty safe, especially after the really dark and existential Soul last year. But that doesn't mean it's bland or one-dimensional, because while the story relies on tropes, it has delightful and funny characters who you can connect with, along with the fact that it touches nicely on themes of friendship and acceptance, offering easy lessons for younger audiences to really soak in, making for a nice watch overall. But coming in at number 1 is In the Heights, which is easily the feel-good hit of the summer. This movie was just a joy to watch from start to finish, especially because I'm a big fan of musicals. It's something good to watch if you want to just sit back, relax, and smile. Not that there isn't conflict or stakes or anything, it's just that the film isn't looking to beat you down for 2.5 hours, and it's more about the way in which these characters overcome adversity. So while there's this tendency to be a bit corny at times, there's a positive message at the heart of it, and it's conveyed well through catchy songs, solid acting, and visually stunning dance sequences. And with such a great up-and-coming cast leading the charge on this one, I hope we'll see plenty more of them in the years to come. This was one of the most delightful experiences I had watching a movie this year, and it easily comes in as my number 1 movie of June. And that's that for June. Pretty solid month overall, even if I saw less. As I've been doing, I still plan on trying to cover whatever I missed in the months to come, and I definitely plan on watching films like Zola, Vicious Fun, and Werewolves Within to have ready for my July monthly wrap-up, as I had them all on my most anticipated movies of June video. Plus, I'll try squeezing in whatever else I can as I still get adjusted to a new schedule. But stay tuned for more reviews coming soon. But let me know, what were your favorite movies of June? Was it anything I listed here? Was it something I left off? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.